Suzanne McCormack, and I have been at the Community College of Rhode Island for 17 years. CCRI is the only community college in Rhode Island. We have between 14 and 17,000 students a year, depending on how enrollment is going. And we are kind of a special place in the sense that we have a program called Rhode Island Promise, which provides 2 years of community college for free to high school graduates in Rhode Island, as long as they start immediately after graduation. And we are also a Hispanic serving institution, which means we have more than 25% of our students are identify as Hispanic. And then in addition to that, we have about 15% or so of our students identify as Black or African American. So altogether, our school is more than 50% BIPOC. So it's an interesting and very diverse place to work. In addition to that, we have students of all ages. Right now in my summer classes, I have a student who's a 65-year-old recent retiree who never graduated from college and is really wants to finish. So I've been fortunate to have this very diverse student population, and also to be, as a historian, very interested in issues regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. I've had the good fortune of being in a state where DEI is strongly encouraged. So I've been able to, for several years, even before the horrific murder of George Floyd in 2020, even before that, when people started really talking about DEI, we were at the Community College of Rhode Island really, I think, ahead of a lot of places in talking about diversity in terms of race, gender, ethnicity, all kinds of issues on our campus. So I've been very fortunate to be in that environment throughout my teaching career. But one of the things that, all the recent political kind of chaos about DEI has really got me to think about is, what are the sort of non-political things that we could be doing in our classrooms that address issues of diversity, inclusion, equity, and they're not political, right? They're not things that red state, blue state politicians need to be arguing about. They're things that have more to do with the basic humanity of day-to-day life. And I say this coming from a perspective of, I teach what are some of the most political classes on our campus. We only have 5 historians for our several thousand students. I teach women's history, I teach Black history, I teach Latin America, I teach American social history. So everything I teach, there's a lot of discomfort in conversations in those classes. And it's something that I don't want to say that I've been attracted to it, but I've enjoyed it from the perspective of the fact that my students tend to come from inner city areas of Providence and Central Falls, 2 of the largest school systems in New England, both of which have been shut down from the state over at different points because of challenges in those systems. And so a lot of my students come in not only being either students of Hispanic origin or students of color, but never having been in a classroom where they've been able to talk about Black history or Latin American history or women's history or any of those things. So I feel like my job, no matter what, is somewhat political, right? Because there are many states in which I could not teach what I teach. And some of the things that we say and talk about are definitely uncomfortable. So what I've tried to do is think about these ideas of DEI, but within the classroom setting in non-political ways. The first thing I do in my DEI-informed classroom to sort of focus on the culture and really encourage a good culture in my classroom is, on day 1, we make table tents. And I know you all have a table tent in front of you, right? Which is because you're at a meeting. But has anyone ever made table tents with their students? So I have my little example table tent here, and it's kind of wrong because I do both sides in class. But what we do on the very first day is I say to my students, I give them a card. I bring a whole pile of stickers. That's usually the most exciting part. I bring markers. And I have them just write the name they prefer, whatever name that is. and their pronouns. And I know, again, for some of you in your states, the pronouns thing is off. But I do the pronouns because I like to ask everyone, because if you ask everyone, then you're not looking at one particular person and saying, well, what are your pronouns? Instead, you're saying to everyone in the class, tell us what your pronouns are. And then that also makes some of the students who maybe haven't really thought much about their pronouns before, because they haven't had to, they suddenly go, oh, I guess it does matter. I do want to be called he, him, or I do understand why that's an important thing to somebody and why that might matter. So I have them just put their preferred name and their pronouns, and then I have them decorate their little table tents. And the reason I do this on the first day is that for the entire semester, as long as they last, sometimes the table tents are lost, they have on their desk in class, front and back, their first name. So the people around them, and my classes have usually about 30 people in them. So the people around them always see their name. They always know the name of that person that's sitting next to them. So that automatically gives them something that they know about each other, right? So when I miss class and I come in the next day, and Natalie always sits next to me, but I never talk to her because I'm always just on my phone. Now instead, I come in and I can say, Natalie, do you have the notes from yesterday? Right? And this is actually something that my students do. You would be shocked at how excited your students will get about a marker, a card, and some stickers on the first day of class. They will have conversations with each other about the stickers, about, I tend to pick things that I think will be fun. Like, you probably can't tell, but I have a little Iron Man there. Like, I get some Marvel stickers, or I do some rainbows and some flowers and some donuts and some just random things. And we've had, 5-minute conversations on that first day about why it is that Professor McCormack really dislikes Captain America, because I don't like him. And that's a conversation, right? And that conversation gets everyone sort of started thinking about it. And you might get some students in the class who say, oh, I don't see Marvel movies. I've never seen it. I like this kind of stuff or that kind of stuff. That 5 minutes of conversation and making those little table tents, it really just breaks the ice, right? And we know, because we're all sitting here and we're listening to each other and we look across and I say, I don't have to memorize Lindsay's name because her name is right in front of her. And it's the same with the students, right? But they come to class and they literally, as goofy as it sounds, will come into my class and pull out their table tent every day and stick it up there. And if they lose it in the first week, they'll ask me, can I make a new one? I've had students go home and decorate it, remake it, because they want it to look nicer. These are things that help them to feel like they are included in the room, right? They feel like people are acknowledging their existence, right? Who they are, maybe what they're interested in. At minimum, again, like in Rhode Island, it's not an issue to have their pronouns on the card. These basic things help the students feel more connected to my classroom. And as I said, it's sort of adding to this is that casual conversation component. Right? I am a big fan of casual conversation. Kristen isn't here, but Kristen and I did a webinar several months ago from Macmillan in which we talked about the importance of that first couple of minutes of class, right? And how you set the tone when you come into the classroom. And I have been, as I said, I've been at CCRI for 17 years. I was at private four-year schools for about 10 years before that. And one of the things I noticed as somebody who is now in the position where I have to evaluate peers is a lot of times faculty walk into the room and they just immediately get going, right? Because whatever they have to say that day is so important that they don't want to miss a single minute. But what I would say to you is think for a few minutes about, what if I had their attention more effectively because we talked for a minute or two about what was on television the night before? What if they were actually listening to me because they knew that for the past, 3 or 4 weeks, I've also been watching True Detective on Sunday nights. And let's catch up on that. And take just a minute or two. It's really nothing. It's that time in which you as the faculty member are getting your slides up, you're maybe passing some stuff out. We all know how that is. We're all doing stuff at the beginning of class. We don't have to be doing that in isolation. We're going to be doing that and having a conversation with the students at the same time. And one of the things that I say to them is that if they can't tell, because on the first day, a lot of times students will look at me when I start talking to them about random things, and they'll say, "Do you really want us to answer these questions?" Like I'll say, "Did anyone see any good movies?" or whatever. And, "Does she really want us to answer this?" And I always say to them, if we can't talk about these most basic things, then how are we going to talk about some of this really, really difficult stuff that's happened in our history? Or these really complex problems? Or if you don't feel comfortable talking to me about the fact that, you love Iron Man 3, and you know why because you have 10 reasons. If you don't feel comfortable talking to me about that, how are you going to ask me for extra help? How are you going to come to me and say, "I don't understand the reading," right? We have to figure out some ways to break down those spaces between ourselves and our students. And I think about, this stuff within the concept of DEI, right? The DEI doesn't have to be a political thing. It can be just a human thing, right? Thinking about recognizing the diversity in your classroom, recognizing that that sharing something about yourself also helps them to feel more comfortable and confident talking about their challenges. I've done this with my classes consistently since the pandemic, because when we came back from the pandemic, it was really obvious that the students had this social gap, right? Forget about the educational gaps, but the social and socializing gap where, especially in New England, we were closed down for quite a bit of time. Students came back and they felt uncomfortable. They didn't want to talk to each other. They're staring at their phones, all of these things. So I feel like, these kinds of encouragements of casual conversation have helped break some of that down. I also do a lot of low stakes or even no stakes group work. And again, it's conversation. So it'll be around something from an assignment. A lot of times, I'm the only historian in here, but in the History Achieve stuff, there are primary sources, and a lot of times those primary sources have little 4-question quizzes that come with them. So one of the things I do for equity in my classroom is I request from the college, and you can probably do this at your school, and they just don't advertise it. I request from my college that IT have a laptop cart in my room every day. And the reason I do that is because not everyone has a laptop. Not everyone has access to, technology to bring to school every day with them. Some of my students, they're all commuters. Some of them are sharing a desktop at home with their family members. So I have a laptop in class for everyone every day. And we will we'll go into Achieve, we'll go into our ebook, we'll go into the primary sources, and I'll have them in a little group of 2 or 3 students going through the primary source. Okay, divide it up. Maybe each of you reads a paragraph. Then you share with each other what was in that paragraph, and then the 4 of you together answer those questions. And this is, again, it can be completely no stakes, really, right? It's not going to hurt them in any way. Those kinds of things help break down those differences in the classroom and help the students to see connections. They also help the students to meet each other, to see ways in which they can help each other. I've had many students in my class tell me that they have people from other classes in their classroom, that in that other classroom they never talk to each other, right? They never speak. The professor never says anything to them about anything but chemistry, math, biology, English, whatever it is, right? And that is for them challenging. And I definitely, especially as a historian, you can't, you could argue with me till you're blue in the face about content and missing content. There's no way you can ever get all the content in a history course, right? It's just, there's too much. So we all are making those choices, right? And I definitely have had to make those choices to make this work. The last thing I want to talk about is the Achieve survey tools. I have found, in terms of understanding students and issues about whether students feel included in their community, whether they feel like there are challenges that are facing them personally or challenges that are facing their community within our educational institution, they are able to address these things in those surveys. If you're not familiar with them, the one that I wrote down the one that I really, really like because I didn't want to forget the name of it. I generally start off the semester with using the beginning of the year reflective response and goal setting surveys. So what I have the students do is fill out the survey usually on the first day of class or that first week of class, depending on what our time is like. And it asks them questions about, what are your plans? What do you need to do? What do you need to do with this class? Why are you taking this class? It has some multiple choice questions, but it also has some open-ended ones. And the open-ended ones are the ones I find most helpful. And I printed this out just so I could share with you a couple of the things that students wrote this summer session, just to share, like, these are things that I wouldn't know about them if I didn't ask. I asked the question, what do you plan to do with this class? And I had several students write about the fact that they're in health sciences. They don't know what they're going to do with a history class. They don't really understand why they have to take a history class in health sciences. They think they're going to go on to a four-year college, but they're not sure. And so they know they have to take this course, but they don't know why. That's a message to me, right? That's a message to me as the instructor, that I need to help this be relevant to those students, right? I can't assume that it is. I remember when my first year teaching at CCRI, I did some professional development about working with first year students, and I read a book that I can't remember the title of right now. But the author wrote that professors, we are not always great teachers because we liked school too much. Right? Like, many of us really liked being at school, and I can tell you, and I write the history blog for Macmillan, and I know you probably don't read the history blog because you're not historians, but the history blog this month is about my dad, who was a history teacher who recently passed away. And, I wrote about the fact that I used to pretend I was teaching at home, right? So I am not the best measure of what is fun in class, is what I'm saying to you, right? So we need to ask students these questions. Why are you here? What are the challenges that you're facing? Several students wrote in the survey with the question that we asked, that I asked as part of this Achieve survey was, what challenges do you think you're going to have in this class? Several students wrote very specific mental health challenges. I had a student say, I've recently started medication for depression. It's making me really tired. I'm really worried about the reading. I'm worried that I'm going to fall asleep while I'm doing the reading. They've said, I have a lot of anxiety, test anxiety. Things that, I'm able to then see, because of the way that the survey is set up in Achieve, I see who wrote that, right? It only shows to me. And then I'm able to address that. Not necessarily, I'm not going to walk into class and say, Natalie, I see that you have test anxiety, obviously. But I can come into class if I've seen that, I only have 15 students right now in the summer class that I recently did this in. And 5 of the 15 students said that they are concerned about a mental health situation. So I was able to say, on the second time we met, I was able to just, bring up to them as I was making announcements, just some general things. By the way, did you all know that on our college website now, we have access to some additional mental health resources? And I could do this without, again, being, referring to anyone specifically. I didn't even have to have a private conversation with them. I could just have this be part of our conversation in class. Some of them talked about, I'm not sure how I'm going to get the reading done. And I was able to then, kind of narrow down at that second day what resources might be helpful for this class to know about, right? The tutoring center, the reading support center. These are things that, especially in a situation where students are commuters, they're not always, aware of everything that's available in the buildings, and who's where. And so, again, I come back to this idea that, we tend to think about, in the current world, we tend to think about DEI as this very political thing. But there are so many ways that you within your classroom can be using these concepts of diversity, inclusion, equity, and think about ways that you can better connect with your students and, find some ways to have, some better interactions so that they do want to learn what you're teaching them. Because I have lots of nursing students, for example, at CCRI, who thought they'd never need to take a history class, and then they end up taking more than one. Right? Because they learn that there is a lot of stuff there that's helpful for them, that knowing some of this information is going to be helpful for them just as a human being, right? And working in the public. So I would just encourage you to think about some of these things as you're working through your own classes.